Hi there, my name is Luke, and I like making video games! Yeah! Thanks so much.
Hi, Luke.
I like making video games so much that I'd like to make it my job in the future. There's just one issue. I can't spend my life working on projects that I can never share with the people closest to me. Namely, my parents, siblings, and one day I hope a future wife. And upsettingly, this isolation seems to be the norm for this industry. Mr. Nintendo Miyamoto's wife can't get into anything other than mobile games. Eiji Aonuma has a similar story, and I'd argue that most of you in this room are making games that your parents or partner just won't be able to play. And I'm sorry, but to me that just sounds suffocating. To make something you love so much and to not be able to share it with the ones you love most, I refuse to have that be me. So, 4 years ago, to figure out why people have difficulty playing more complex video games, I had my mom play Deltarune without any help, and I had my sister play Bendy and the Ink Machine without any help. It did not go well. From their suffering, and 2 videos by Extra Credits, I learned that along with issues regarding the crash in 1983, current marketing, negative press, and all sorts of other issues, we have an untaught language of things that gamers are just expected to know. This language involves naturally knowing things like how to press 2 buttons on a keyboard at once, how to move a camera around without staring at the floor, and how to jump horizontally and vertically in a 3D platformer, as you see beautifully illustrated. While my victims were suffering, on the other side of the age spectrum, we had my 3-year-old baby nephew Lucas, who would ask to play the car game on his dad's Xbox for 5 minutes once every few days. And over the course of the past few years, I think like us, baby Lucas has learned gaming's untaught language through trial and error and a lot of time that children have, but adults don't. And that seems to be the story I keep on hearing from people who really want to get into video games, but can't. So I figured, let's just start teaching this untaught language. I've created what I've called non-gamer tutorials to teach the untaught basics of a game before it begins. I started documenting this journey on my old YouTube channel, Etra Games, and then moved over to a new channel, which I am streaming this speech from right now, called Games for Non-Gamers. Through those channels, my subscribers helped me make and test non-gamer tutorials for Portal, Toki Time Trials, and Journey. These short 15-minute games taught new players how to walk, press multiple buttons at once, time jumps, look around without staring at the floor, and more. And the results of just teaching these basic mechanics has been staggering. In our non-gamer testing, we found that Journey, the game I would like to call the best entry point for non-gamers, takes around an hour and a half for an average gamer to complete, but a non-gamer with a coach takes about 4 rough hours to beat the game. We then had 6 sets of non-gamers with gamer coaches play my 20-minute non-gamer tutorial, then Journey, and both games only took them 3 hours, the same time as movie night, and each of the quote-unquote test subjects had a great time. So that got me thinking, if these non-gamer tutorials help out so much, then why not put them in every game? Imagine if Journey just had a button on its menu that said, non-gamer tutorial. My mom could click it, and when I was a kid, me and her could play it for hours. In COVID, how many grandparents could play games with their children if they had non-gamer tutorials to speed them through the trial and error of learning gaming's language? So here's how you add a non-gamer tutorial to your Unity game. You download Etra's non-gamer tutorial maker from the Unity Assets Store. And as you can see, we have a whole system where you, step by step, you select what genre your game is as part of the Etra starter assets made. A part here, which I skimmed through, is you select what abilities your the character should already know, which abilities you want to teach, and what abilities they can't do out of all the abilities in the open source asset. And then it builds for you these level chunks, which you can rearrange and sort and make your own custom non-gamer tutorial. And all you have to do is make a button to that scene, and I will feature you on my YouTube channel full of people hungry for games that they can teach their parents. Yeah, that's my deal. Thank you. Does anyone have any questions? Yes.
And then you expect the person implementing this in their game to change it to their graphics, or do you plan on providing them with the graphics and everything like that as well?
Yes, so graphics here are clearly a bit of a sore spot that I've got to work through. But the idea is the starter assets and this non-gamer tutorial maker are all built to just go additively on top of any Unity game. So it's just going into a different video game, basically, if they press that button. So, for example, like Journey, I'm imagining if they wanted to not spend the time making their own full custom non-gamer tutorial thing, they press the button, and then it just goes to my 20-minute training program. Something like that. So far, I focused on function over form, but I'd love, these projects are all open source, I'd love any help I can get. Yes.
Are you also planning on writing guidelines and documents for people who want to implement it on their own?
I've got video tutorials already for the starter assets this is built on, but
I mean, like guidelines in general for what should you be teaching and what's the best way to teach should they want to implement everything in their game on their own.
I'd say, like, I can write some general stuff in documentation, but that's kind of what my channel is all about. Like, here's this helped versus this helped. Like, for example, I mentioned, like, pressing 2 buttons on a keyboard is difficult for non-gamers. Well, it's because it's built in their brain that when they're typing on a document, you can't press 2 buttons at once. You'll mess up the word you're typing. So it's a lot easier for them to start on a controller where they have no bad associations connected to it versus attempting to even press 2 buttons next to each other on a keyboard, which shocked me because I think that would be backwards, like they're familiar with the keyboard, but there's nothing to unlearn on the controller.
Cool. More questions?
As someone who is kind of bad at 3D games and only recently started playing it this year, how does it feel to be this awesome?
What do you mean? As in, like...
How do you feel like being awesome like you are?
Oh, okay. About knowing 3D games. It's called I just grew up around them. I don't think there's anything more fancy than that. Yes.
Why do you think Journey's a better onboarding game than a 2D game?
A few reasons. Okay, if you think of any 2D game, you say like, it's 2D, therefore it's simple. Well, over the course of years, we've kind of had a weird thing where the longer a genre is out, the more its language builds up, and the more strict they are about you already know it. So like Shovel Knight, like very first screen has 3 pits where if you fall in, you immediately die. Like they know you will make those jumps. Any major platformer game, first of all, it's like 6 to 8 hours long. In the difficulty spike, you could throw a non-gamer in front of that for 3 hours and they'd get past level 1. And that wouldn't be a fun experience. The reason we go with Journey and stuff is because, oddly enough, since they haven't been out as long, first-person games and third-person games are more initially forgiving. And then there's also been a bit of a psychological benefit of, hey, if they can play scary 3D game from beginning to end in 3 hours, this is possible. If they're over here doing something more simple, then that gate doesn't fully open up as much from what I've heard and interviewed, and yeah. So,
All right. Thank you.
thank you very much.